for instance, as well, when I was in Yaroslavl and we had, a, really lots of snow that was so bad that public transport and the roads were just unusable. But it's not as if they send snowplows out. It's not as if, the army would have to come out and deal with it. It would just be an army of old ladies, probably in their 60s, who'd just come out with, rakes and shovels and just be 6 o'clock in the morning just clearing the road.
Hello and welcome to One-Off Travel Stories. I'm your host, Andrew Tawashurna. Here each episode I chat with someone about one of their favorite travel stories. That one story they've told countless times to friends and family around the dinner table. Today we're joined by Ben Jovic. Ben is an intrepid traveler with a love of languages, dabbling in Russian, Spanish, French, German, on top of his native English. He is British born, but living in the United States and working in the technology industry. Today he's going to tell us about his time in Russia. He was actually there for a year in 2012, living in Yaroslavl in Saint Petersburg. And consequently, he has some fascinating stories from his time there. But I'll let him tell us more. Hey, Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Andrew.
Yeah, a pleasure. Glad to have you on. Excited to talk to you today and then hear your story. Before we jump into that, I know you like traveling and you're just constantly planning your next trip. You tend to do like multi-leg, many-stop trips when as much as you can with a full-time job. So I'd love to know, where did it all start? How did you sort of get into traveling?
Well, I've always been passionate about the world and obviously trips and, having the linguistic background that I had as well, having studied languages at university throughout school. I was always interested in, countries of the world and always wanted to get into travel, but never really had the opportunity until I hit 18. And that's when I did Interrail with my older brother. We started in Venice, probably only had like 150 British pounds, like probably today money is about $200 of spending money for the whole trip. And we started in Venice. We then went down to Rome and took an overnight train to Munich, Vienna, Berlin, Cologne, Brussels, and Paris. So that was the first trip I had. And after that, I was just captivated by travel. It really got me into travel. I was constantly planning my next trips. I never really had the money in my early 20s, so that was very difficult actually. And then of course studying at the same time. It wasn't really until I guess the past few years, probably post-COVID, which is like most folks really after the travel bug struck. We were stuck at home for 2 years and we were never really able to go anywhere apart from round the corner for a quick stroll. But it was then in 2022 when I just decided to go to Japan. I've just been addicted ever since. I've just been, going on trips to Asia, around Europe, planning more trips to Latin America as well, because I've only been to Costa Rica and Mexico City. And even, throughout the US as well, for that matter. Definitely always up for road trips, definitely up for seeing what else the country has to offer, Canada too, for that matter.
Well, getting the chance to do a rail trip with your sibling is amazing. I think anyone with a sibling, and something about rail trip around Europe too is such a classic way to do it, especially if you can get one of those. I don't know, do they still have a Europass sort of?
They do. I think for Americans, or maybe North Americans, it's called Eurail, but for Europeans, it's Interrail. It used to be a case, and I'd always suggest people do it before the age of 25 because that's when it's cheaper.
Yeah.
Whereas it used to get more expensive, but now I think they've upped it to 27. So anybody under the age of 27 should do it. I've encouraged folks to do it, and they've been all over Europe. They've been, because sometimes they even do just like single country passes. So you could maybe just pay like 70 euros or so and then spend 10 days just railing around Italy.
Yeah.
But we actually did the multi-country one. It was 10 days of travel around Central Europe. And I loved it.
You probably didn't want to stop.
No, I didn't actually as well. I mean, of course, I was very excited to get back to my own bed after sleeping in stations on trains and the odd hostel as well. But, that was all part of the fun.
Yeah, definitely. You mentioned something, languages. I know, actually, I know vaguely. I don't actually know all the languages you do speak, or at least have some knowledge of. But what started that?
So I think that really came from my granddad. My granddad actually was from Serbia and spoke, I believe, like 9 languages for that matter. So I think there is a
Wow.
genetic link. Also, at the same time, wasn't really until I went to secondary school at the age of 11 that's when I started learning languages because they never taught us foreign languages at primary school in the UK. So it was then really I got into French. I started learning German. I started learning Spanish as well through an extracurricular activity the school offered. And that's really when I started to get into language learning and thought it's the one thing at school I enjoyed, apart from obviously playing soccer, but I was never really going to be the next David Beckham. So I'd still also start thinking about, career opportunities here. And then that took me to St Andrews University, where I actually did learn languages. I actually did German, Spanish, Russian. I didn't do French there as well, but I did do French for our high school. Absolutely loved it, but I haven't really spoken French for a long time. Probably last time I spoke French must have been 2017 in Montreal. But then when they realized, my French was limited, they just responded back in English.
Yeah, yeah.
It was fun
And
while it lasted.
that's a lot of languages at school, actually, though. That's
It is,
yeah.
yeah. And I guess another language I'd add is Ben, which of course is my own language, really, which, set few can understand. When the jokes come out, then you can just laugh, be polite.
The language of humor.
Oh, absolutely.
Did you learn Serbian growing up?
Never, no. Unfortunately, my dad never learnt it as well because my dad only had one Serbian parent. My grandma was English. So my dad grew up speaking English at home. But
Right.
nonetheless, I would say that when I was in Belgrade, I did try speaking Russian. And occasionally it worked. But then other times when they responded in Serbian, it didn't work. So it was probably a bit of a one-way system. They do
Yeah.
overlap quite a bit. A lot of Eastern European languages do overlap. And that can definitely make it easier to learn one Eastern European language if you're fluent in another. But again, I never really got around to learning Serbian.
Right. But you do, I would imagine, know Cyrillic, correct?
Yes, correct. So I can certainly read a lot of the Eastern European languages. I mean, knowing Russian, I can read Ukrainian, but then I imagine if someone speaks Ukrainian to me, I wouldn't be able to understand them because Ukrainian itself, I'd probably say is more aligned with Polish than it is with Russian, even if it does use the Cyrillic alphabet.
Huh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean,
Mm.
I speak French. My Spanish is okay, conversational, but I feel like I can read Italian. It was I ended up in Romania traveling a few summers ago, and like just didn't really realize it was romantic language, and until I got there, and I was like, oh wow, this is so nice. I can kind of figure out what's going on everywhere. So I imagine, and it might not be, I imagine it's sort of like that if you know Russian and know the Cyrillic language, but you can correct me if I'm wrong.
I believe so. I think Bulgarian and Russian may have a lot of overlaps, from what I understand. But then, of course, you do get Macedonian, for example. I mean, you even do get some Turkic languages that use the Cyrillic alphabet as well. So I think that would be. I mean, I don't know any Turkic languages, anything like Uzbek or Kazakh, for
Mm.
instance, as well. They probably have more in common with Turkish, yet they use the Cyrillic alphabet. So that would be interesting to hear. I can't see myself having any success learning them.
Well, I've enjoyed this language sidebar, but I don't know if the listeners will be or want to go
No, they've
as
probably all got
deep.
to sleep now as
Yeah,
well.
yeah,
I mean, you've probably just lost
yeah.
5 million subscribers, or
Oh
yeah.
no. But that being said, pretty good segue. I know you mentioned speaking Russian, and today you're going to tell us a story about your time in Russia. But before we jump right into that, I'd love to get some, get us started with some background. What year is it? Why are you going to Russia? Yeah, anything that you think would be relevant.
Yes, so I guess I should probably start by saying like one of the perks of doing foreign languages at a British university is having the opportunity to study abroad, and that's the exact position I found myself in 2012. So I was trying to think about where I'm going to spend my year abroad, and obviously studying German, Spanish, Russian. These were, obviously the choices I was given. A country where one of those languages is spoken, and I will point out that Spain was obviously the most popular of the option among us language students, mostly because obviously you could spend a year in the beach, just by the beach as well.
Of course.
In the sun, in the mountains, wherever it may be. You can drink all the sangria you like, eat all the tapas you like as well, all the churros, and then Erasmus and British Council were going to pay the bill.
Didn't know
But
they
again,
covered all that good stuff, but yeah, that's nice.
well, yeah, they did actually. It was very generous of them, of course. But the one option that I was thinking, I was on about splitting my year, which is also very common. I wanted to spend my second semester in Saint Petersburg in Russia. And then I wanted to spend my first semester originally in Germany, just doing some sort of work experience as well. I didn't really want to spend it in a university. But as you can imagine, like as a 20-year-old, I mean, in this day and age, it's really difficult to get a job. So you can imagine actually, being an underqualified 20-year-old weedy student, obviously just trying to find some sort of work experience in a foreign country was about as impossible as it could be. In order to secure something like that, I didn't really realize until trying it that you had to essentially have a very close relative who had their own business and was willing to put you up for a few months or so. So I went to one of my Spanish professors for help, and he actually advised me, which was brilliant advice, which is actually spend your whole year in Russia, because I'd studied German and Spanish at school as well, and my Russian was really far behind. And so he said, you can spend your summers. At the time, Britain was in the EU, so there was unlimited options of actually spending time there. So I could spend my summers in Germany and Spain if I wanted to, and then spend your full year in Russia. It's an opportunity, and it will get your Russian better. And
Right.
I will admit, it wasn't until I actually got there I realized how bad my Russian was. So
Right.
this was actually probably one of the best advice I got.
This is great advice. Actually, I don't think I asked this, but I guess like German, Spanish, French, like that all makes sense. What was the Russian connection because of Serbia? Like, why did you start studying Russian?
Yeah, it probably was like because of my Eastern European heritage. Obviously, my Serbian grandfather as well. And also, I loved growing up watching like James Bond movies, spy thrillers as well. And I knew that, just thinking about the career too, that, Russian as a language would be a very useful language to have. Wealth of possibilities, whether it be business opportunities or whether it be, careers in the United Nations, where Russian is one of the main languages. And I guess there was also a personal interest as well. I'd always been fascinated by the country, fascinated by Eastern Europe in general. And obviously, the geopolitical side of it, the historical side of it. Also, it's worth pointing out Russia has fascinating, literature, and a lot of people were very interested in that. However, I mean, it's not really something I dived into too much until I started studying the language.
Gotcha. So just generally a broad interest. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, sorry to disappoint. I mean, I'd love to say there was something specific, like the Bellini, the Borscht, and the ballet, but unfortunately
that is
not.
A fantastic answer. And probably if you want to learn a language, you should make sure you like, there's, a lot about the differences of like across the board of the culture. So no, that checks out with my experiences as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, just coming back to what I was saying, I mean, it wasn't really until I got there I realized how bad my Russian was. But of course, I'll come to, my experience there in a moment. I'll just build up to, the nerve-wracking experience I had just in the build-up, really, to going to Russia. It kind of reminds me of like when you're on a roller coaster and you're at that 90 degrees going up, and then there's going to be a huge drop in a moment. It's that tension, really, as well.
Yeah.
It's because also like I said earlier as well, it was easy to get into Europe, mainland Europe, for the most part in those days, because Britain was in the European Union. No visas required, whereas there was a big visa process involved. It involved lots of paperwork as well, one of those standard application forms that obviously, most countries do have. And also an invitation from the Russian Ministry of Internal Affairs, which was probably one of the most terrifying pieces of paper I think I've ever seen in my life, because it was how it was written as well, and just invitation in capital letters, which didn't really look inviting, ironically enough. I think what also made it a bit scary was just before, all my friends were telling me, oh, don't die out there, it's so dangerous, try not to get killed. I thought, I'm just going to two cities. One was Yaroslavl, another was St. Petersburg. It's not like I was going to be, dropped into the middle of Siberia in the heart of winter. surrounded by a load of wolves that I had to run away from. I mean, it was just simply, studying abroad for 2 semesters.
Yeah.
I mean, God, that would have been an experience, though.
That being said, it sounds like so you were still sort of nervous to get there.
Definitely nervous to get there. Yeah, I mean, of course, I knew myself it wasn't the experience that my friends thought I was going to have. Being surrounded by wolves in Siberia and coming back as I don't know Mowgli with a fur hat and 4 jackets on or so and a big beard. It was just simply going to be studying abroad, so I was just going to try and treat it like any study abroad that anybody was going to have. And plus, it wasn't that I was by myself. There was somebody else from my university that was out there, lots of other British students that were out there too, and another Norwegian student as well, who I did become very good friends with and got to travel around the country with as well. So yeah, despite the anxiety, I was eventually off. And little did I know that the plane meal that I had when I was flying out there was actually probably the last decent meal I was going to have for a very long time, because I ended up living with. Yeah. Well, I ended up living with an old lady in my first semester as well. And I kid you not, I don't know what was worse, her English or her cooking, because she provided, 2 meals a day, breakfast and dinner as well. And she couldn't speak any English, so you can imagine how terrible her cooking was.
I don't know. The English aren't exactly known for their cooking, Ben.
We're not, but again, we don't give beetroot soup every night, or if that's what you can call it anyway, beetroot soup, and then some sour cream thrown in, and a few slices or crusts of bread to go with it as well. So it wasn't exactly the most appetizing meal, and I do remember complaining to my dad about having beetroot soup so much, and it was just before Christmas I got back to the UK for the Christmas holidays after my first semester. And so I think he saw the funny side of it and then ended up wrapping up some beetroot in some wrapping paper and giving it me for Christmas.
That's great.
It was Happy Christmas from Babushka was actually the message on it too. I thought, well, at least he saw the funny side of it. But yeah, that was certainly, it was living with her, I'd say in general, was certainly a very interesting experience. I mean, of course, it was great for my Russian because she couldn't speak any English. So I was thrown into the deep end there and all I could do was improve. And she, ridiculed me as well, essentially, about having such poor Russian. But that just made me want to do better, really made me want to speak more. And all I could do was learn. I do recall as well that she definitely had some strange gift ideas, for that matter. I got some decent ones, which are some teacup holders. So this is quite common in Russia, and it used to be very common in the Soviet Union, where they'd have some small holders with handles on, and then you'd put a glass in, and it was essentially like a portable teacup. People would take them on trains when they're traveling. People would take them on holidays, or people would just have them, for social purposes as well. So I got 2 of these as well, but I feel sorry for the guy who was before me because he was essentially given a portrait of Joseph Stalin. so all I could say really was just, thank God I wasn't born a year earlier, because I think that would be an interesting thing to explain to customs when I got back to the
UK. So wait, when you arrived, is that when she gives, is that when she gave you a gift? Was that, or was it when you were leaving?
It was like a welcome gift as well. Okay. So upon arrival, I mean, I've just get off the bus that brought me from Moscow airport to Yaroslavl, where I was, and then obviously go into some old Soviet style building. That was the first time it was a culture shock, because my travel at the time was only Central Europe and Florida. They're the only places I'd ever been in the world. So going to Russia was definitely a culture shock. It was definitely something different. I think, to put it bluntly, when I did leave and go back to the UK, that was literally like Back to the Future. It was like I was staying in an old Soviet-style apartment. Everybody was like, dressing like it was the 1980s. Mullets were, in fashion. I think the only thing that was probably modern and like non-Russian at the time was Gangnam Style.
Wow. Okay. Wait. I'm loving the description of it. So, you flew. Did you say it was the Yaroslavl?
Yaroslavl was my first semester, which is like 4 hours from Moscow, and is also known for its churches. It's probably got more Orthodox churches out of any Russian city per capita, I'd say.
And this is 4 hours east,
Yeah,
Southeast,
northeast. It's
northeast. Okay.
literally northeast of Moscow. It's typically dubbed as a suburb of Moscow, but it definitely isn't a suburb of Moscow. It's just 4 hours would obviously get you across Washington State for the most part, whereas obviously 4 hours in Russia is probably not that far from Moscow
Right. That
in the grand
shows
scheme of
you
things.
the Russia's huge, so they're probably like, yeah, very 4 hours. So it's a suburb, you know?
Yeah, that's I think why they do call it the the suburb for the most part. Maybe a suburb of Moscow is anything like right out to Siberia. Who knows?
Okay. So you land directly there,
Mm,
and I like head to this, as you said, very Soviet style apartment.
hmm
Meet your new housemate. Um, I like. Are you feeling more nervous, less nervous? How are you doing? Were
I
you
definitely wasn't.
regretting your decision, or?
Well, I definitely wasn't as nervous for sure, but I knew to myself. I said to myself, "This is going to take some adjusting," because it's like it was an apartment that I'd never really lived in before as well. I grew up in, a house. I was so accustomed to having like modern-ish university accommodation, but living in something that was probably built in the 1960s and not really renovated since the 70s was quite a shock for me as well. But I was just ready for the adventure then. I think I was obviously nervous until I really landed in Moscow. And that's really when, the sense of adventure, the urge to go and explore and really take on this new life that I was going to be in temporarily was, really kicked in as well. So I was very open.
Nice. So yeah, you're in Yaroslavl. You're in your apartment. What's next?
So I guess really just exploring the city. I ended up going to Moscow as well, which was good. I ended up taking just a train down to Moscow. I even was studying for the most part as well. It got down to minus 40 degrees in the winter, which I mean we don't even need to say whether it's Celsius or Fahrenheit because that's where the two meet. So that's definitely easier for all the viewers, of course. And I'd say really I spent the first few months in Yaroslavl just like trying to focus on, really adapting, really trying to improve my Russian for the most part. It was so cold. It was just like covered in snow and there wasn't really much to do. There wasn't really opportunities to go and explore outside of the city. So I really just stayed put for the most part, really, and just like tried to socialize as much as possible with, some of the locals, really try to improve my Russian, try to train my palate into getting used to borscht and other soups that I was given or
Mm-hmm.
whatever food that I was, presented with, questionable as it may be. And then really, going down to Volgograd was also something I'd wanted to do for a while. I was really captivated by the historical element of it. Of course, it played a pivotal role in, World War II. And also just stunned at expecting it to be a really old city, but it wasn't at all. It was very Stalinist architecture. It was very, very modern in comparison to what I expected because the whole city had just been completely obliterated during the war. So going there as well and just seeing all this was a surprise, even though I did see what was debated. It's up for debate, but the tallest statue in the world, which is Mamayev Kurgan. The Russians claim it's their tallest statue in the world, but the Chinese, I think, claim that they've got a Buddha statue, which is even bigger. So
It's a big statue. I'm sure it was quite large, though.
But it was definitely a bit bigger than me. So yeah, I'll give you that. I mean, I'll credit them for that for sure.
Still probably very impressive. Either way.
Yeah, I'd definitely say as well. As I got accustomed to the food when I was over there, one thing that my host, Haziaika, as they're called, definitely presented me with was a bottle of vodka with the root still in as well, which is something I'd never seen before. The vodka I was accustomed to was like Smirnoff, which we had in the UK, or Russian Standard. But obviously you can imagine vodka's like the national drink over there. And this homemade vodka she claims that, she'd made it herself from her dacha, which I'd never seen before. But, it definitely was
dacha is
strong.
Like countryside house?
That's just like a country house. A lot of Russians have them and they just use them to grow vegetables. It's like, I guess, their retreat from the city. So it had a root in it as well, which was just floating around, probably screaming, "Help me." And, I just had a shot of the stuff and, well, it was strong.
Was it potato vodka or was it another root vegetable that she made it out of?
I can assume it's potato vodka, but it could be anything, really.
No, I mean
Yeah.
that's kind of fun.
It was definitely interesting, yes. But yeah, obviously then after my first semester, then I moved on to St. Petersburg, which I absolutely loved. And, that was, a remarkable experience. It was still very cold. It was February then I moved on over there. I was actually also living with an old lady, but she wasn't as intense as the other one. I guess I was probably more confident because my Russian was of a much better standard. And also, I mean, she actually didn't just chuck me in a spare bedroom with, a really uncomfortable bed. I basically was given my own, what was the living room with a TV of my own. And I also had access to Sports One, which was unlimited Premier League football matches you could watch, all the Formula One you could watch as well. And actually not feeling like I was, cut off from the rest of the world, because St. Petersburg definitely was a more a more modern city as well, and a very cultural one for that matter.
Yeah.
Mm.
I've always wanted to go. Hopefully, I get to go someday. I have this
Yeah.
view. I'm curious of like both of the ladies that you lived with. How patient were they with your like Russian learning and general? I have like a stereotypical view, but I'm curious how
I
yours
think your
differ.
stereotypical view probably matches the reality, which was not very patient at all. It was difficult, and it did get me a bit disheartened because I felt that, I just couldn't really communicate when I first got there because my Russian was bad. I didn't know how to answer some of the questions. I kept misunderstanding a lot. And I will say, as time went on, I still made mistakes, but I definitely felt more confident, and I definitely could have a conversation as time went on. So it certainly helped. It did. But yeah, I mean, they're not really known for being very patient. And you can imagine actually that they were definitely weren't patient with my Russian, but nonetheless, I persevered, and it's really what got me to improve. If they just kept saying I was doing great all the time, even though I blatantly wasn't,
That
and
sounds
just
positive. That's nice.
yeah, I mean, if they were saying that, then of course, then I'd only know that they'd be lying, and I'd be given false hope.
Um, you spent a good amount of time there. Do you have any highlights or lowlights that stick out in your mind?
Yeah, the highlights obviously were the people that I met over there, because I'd never really met Russians before. Even though Britain does have a sizable Russian population, I'd never really socialized or really met Russians. So I think meeting the people was really nice, because I do love. This is one of the things I do love about my travel, is being able to meet people around the world. Being able to learn about people as well, and how they grew up compared to how I grew up, for example. And so that was really one of the highlights as well. And I will say, when St. Petersburg got warm and the White Nights started to happen, that was also something quite remarkable. It was just so great how I could just walk home at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then just it'd be light outside as well. It never got dark, which also made sleeping difficult, but it was still just like something I'd never seen before.
So is St. Petersburg far enough north that the sun doesn't set?
Oh, it's yeah, definitely in the summertime. It is so far north that the sun just doesn't set. I'd say like at 3 o'clock in the morning, when it should be pitch black, the sky's probably pinkish.
Yeah, yeah. Kind
Yeah, a
of on
bit of
the
a combination between
horizon.
white and pink. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess one uncomfortable experience I probably did have over there was just after I got to St. Petersburg. I was lost. I'd just been out with some friends as well, and I was trying to walk home because the subway had closed. It was probably like 1 o'clock in the morning or so. I went to a gas station just to ask the person at the gas station how I get to my address, which I knew at the time. And then there was somebody else also just like paying for their gas, who was stood next to me as well, and said, oh, that street, I think I know it. Yes, just interrupting the conversation. And then he just walked off. And then I carried on walking down the road thinking, I'm sure this is the way. Even though it did start to look a bit rural, I was actually living on an island, which is the Vasilevsky Island in St. Petersburg at the time. I mean, it's not exactly a remote desert island. It's more just like an island within St. Petersburg, the city.
Wait, did you say it? And that guy said, I think I know where it is, and then just didn't tell you? Is that what?
Yeah, he just walked away and just said, I think
Okay.
I know where it is. But don't worry, he comes back in a moment.
Okay.
Because I then continue to walk, and then a dark windowed SUV just pulls up alongside me, and it's him again, and his wife's driving. He's in the front, and said, oh, that street. Yes, get in. And so then I get into the back of the car, just being so desperate to get home because it's minus 30 something degrees Celsius, and I just thought it's freezing. I mean,
Okay.
my options here, I just had to go with it as well, which now I look back and think, that's only the thing a stupid 20-year-old would do. And he was nice. Him and his wife were just chatting to me about, like, what I was doing here, standard KGB interrogation style questions, what I was doing here and, how long I was here
And
for.
this was all in Russian, I take it?
Yeah, it was. It was all in
Yeah.
Russian. They couldn't speak English. Or, I mean, I only spoke to them in Russian anyway, so
Yeah.
I'm not sure how good their English was. And they could have been from Toronto, as far as I'm concerned. And it wasn't really until the nerves started to kick in as the car ends up slowing down and we pass like a cemetery. But then afterwards, when they shake my hand and tell me, actually, okay, this is your house. And then I realized actually the apartment block was actually next to a cemetery. So they did take me home. And that was just such a relief. But I wouldn't recommend doing it, to be honest.
I mean, other than the fact that it was night and kind of sketchy, that's nice of them,
It was very nice of them. And then
Yeah.
I learned actually that this is actually quite a common thing that a lot of Russians do. They do have general taxis. I mean, Uber wasn't a thing back in 2012, 2013. But it is very common for Russians to actually pull over where people are looking for directions and look a bit lost. And they actually do give you rides home. It's actually, and sometimes they do ask for money for it. So you do have to be prepared to have money, even though it does sound terrifying. But yeah, in my circumstance, I guess, I got home and I wasn't actually far in the end. It was only like a few minutes drive and then turning a corner and driving down another few roads. So I'm sure I would have got home in the end. It's just, I had one of those $10 burner phones, which didn't have Google Maps. So my options of trying to navigate my way home were quite limited.
I mean,
yeah.
I've been in minus 30 Celsius. It's not fun. You're not going to last that long outside if you don't have the right stuff on. Just kind of funny that the guy was like, I know where that is, and then like left. and then showed up again. He's like, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess when I got home as well, I remembered as well.
Yeah.
When I opened the door and found my old, the old lady that was hosting me just laughing at me as I walked in confused and concerned. And, I think by then it was like 6 o'clock in the morning and she was having breakfast, but I just wanted to go to sleep.
It was super late too.
Yeah. And I guess the other scary thing about Russia in general, which I was warned about beforehand, was the police. Now, I think my professor actually, when he gave us all a talk as well and told us about Russia and the risks, because he himself has spent his year abroad out there, probably 20 years prior. He said, you need to be careful of the police and, you can't just carry a photocopy of your passport. You actually need to carry a proper version of your passport, because he actually didn't carry his passport, was detained by the police and was in a Russian prison for 3 hours. So it was very good advice. And I made sure that I carried my passport everywhere I went because I didn't want to take the risk. And I think the Russians themselves actually even feared the police for that matter, because I often saw them stopping people, particularly young men as well, and pulling them aside and asking them for documents. So whether it be obviously people from other countries who, they wanted to check, their paperwork to make sure that they had legal status to be in Russia, or whether it be, young men who were potentially draft dodging and probably looked around 18 or 19 as well and should be doing military service, but had somehow got out and just simply, run away from, conscription.
Were you ever stopped?
Never by the police, but by metro security all the time. I don't know what it is they had against me, but they'd always pull me aside, like check my bags, make me go through metal detectors as well, and then just let me go. And then the police would just salute as I walked past them. So they never really had a problem with me specifically, but yeah, metro security as well. I think
did they check your passport?
No, they didn't, and I don't think they have the authority to do so. They just checked my bags and then just patted me down or made me go through some metal detector. And even if the metal detector went off because I had like keys and, wallet in my pockets, then, they still let me go. So I thought, well, what's the point in this?
You're a suspicious character, Ben.
Yeah. But one thing I was going to say is how Russians themselves, of course, they were suspicious, because I remember at university when we were discussing, what would you do in a situation if your house were burgled? I mean, you and I would obviously call the police. But then our professor just looked at me and said, wait, why on earth would you call the police if your house were burgled? And I thought, well, I'm sorry, man, I didn't realize that the Ghostbusters were a thing in Russia. I mean, who am I supposed to call here? I mean, but it's just that level of distrust and I think the fear that they have of police really as well. That puts people off, I think, getting the police involved, which then does, obviously raise other questions, but I don't want to make this whole podcast episode just about Russian police.
I mean, it's an interesting part of life there. So, fascinating. Well,
I mean, I'm not sure really if that, fear or, distrust of the police actually makes Russians more independent, because I do find they're fiercely independent as individuals, very much so head screwed on, very confident, in that regard. And I always thought maybe it's because a lot of the men do military service. Maybe it's just how they are brought up, perhaps. But at the same time, I just think they're a culture of people that just really get stuck in. They, never really complain. They always, really just keep their heads down and just, soldier on with whatever problems that, they encounter. For instance, as well, when I was in Yaroslavl and we had, really lots of snow that was so bad that public transport and the roads were just unusable. But it's not as if they send snowplows out. It's not as if, the army would have to come out and deal with it. It would just be an army of old ladies, probably in their 60s, who'd just come out with, rakes and shovels and just be 6 o'clock in the morning just clearing the roads. And I thought, gosh, I mean, that's not going to be me when I'm that age.
The image that you're painting is just I don't know. There's something about it, but would make like could make a great documentary. The army of old ladies out there to shovel. It's a great workout. It's a tough workout.
Oh, it was. They were probably in better shape than I was at that time as well.
Well, you were in for the end of it. So for your second half, you were in Saint Petersburg before going back. How did this whole adventure wrap up for you? How did you feel at the end of it?
So at the end, I absolutely was in awe of the adventure, because it was like no experience I'd ever had in my life. And I still look back now, and obviously more countries I have been to, and Asia. I've moved to the US ever since as well. But I'd say it's definitely one adventure that is still, a big part of me, because it's like something I never experienced before. There was the language barrier. There was the culture shock from going over there. And at the end as well, one of my friends did come out to visit, which was also very nice as well. So he was able to see that. And I was actually in a position where I was confident to be a tour guide.
Nice.
Yeah, I'd also say that at the end of the trip, I knew that I wanted to go back. But what is heartbreaking is that I haven't been back since. And I haven't been back since because this was mid-2013 when I left. And a year later, obviously, the geopolitics reared its ugly head, and the situation in Crimea took off. And that then made visas very difficult to get. And I was still a student in 2014. And it wasn't just a case of what I did in the day of getting the paperwork with my passport, sending it off to the Russian embassy, and it would come back a week later with a sticker in your passport and you were ready to go. You then had to go down, have interviews, have your biometrics done. And now, of course, as the situation, tensions between Russia and the West have only gotten worse. It's practically impossible to get to the country.
Yeah, you're very lucky to have gotten there when you did, realistically. How's your Russian today?
Yes, I still am able to talk to Russians as well. I still have Russian friends I do speak to, which is nice. But unfortunately, I don't really get the opportunity to speak Russian as much as I would like. And I'm not using your podcast as, to try to advertise a potential, Russian language meetup. If there is one in Seattle, I'd love to join it as well and actually, try to befriend more Russians. If any of them are listening, please subscribe. It's a brilliant podcast. This I've just got another few million subscribers.
Oh well, thank you.
But actually, there are lots in Seattle. I do even walk down the street as well, and I do hear Russian being spoken. Well, I'm not sure if they are Russian, Belarusian, Kazakh, or from another former Soviet country. But I definitely think it's something I'd like to get involved in. I'd like to be able to connect more with Russians and hopefully, reminisce on the good times, which you and I are doing now.
You should. Well, appreciate it. I mean, so interesting. Some lovely little tidbits there from your time in Russia. It's a fascinating place. Before we wrap up, anything travel? What's in your future travel wise?
So, I just got back from Asia about 6 weeks ago, which was fantastic. Of course, I only was there for 2.5 weeks and ended up seeing so much. So it was very go, go, go. It was, I started in the Philippines, was just there for a couple of days, and then did Bali, swung by Kuala Lumpur for a day, and then Thailand for a week, and then Japan on the way back to Seattle. So all of that in 2.5 weeks was intense. And I did think it was going to
So
be my last
you're
Asia
on a
trip,
break now. Is
but
that what I'm feeling?
well, I'm on a break from an intense trip, but not a break from Asia because I just found that they are actually going to be opening up 30 days of visa-free travel to China for Brits and Canadians, actually, for that matter. So I'm hopefully going to do a trip to China at some point. I'm just trying to figure out when. So I'd definitely love to see a fair bit of China. I'm not sure where exactly, but definitely bookmarked a few places. Reading a Lonely Planet book on China right now. Hoping to maybe learn a bit of Chinese as well, for that matter. And once the journey happens, I look forward to it very much. It's a country that I've always been interested in and always wanted to see.
Amazing. I share that. Well, I'm on the same page as you there. Well, Ben, thanks so much for coming on and telling a story about Russia. I hope someone's listening and they reach out to tell you about the Seattle Russian sort of hangout, and you can practice a little bit and get your Russian back to full power.
Yeah, of course. I'll check the comments.
Again, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Andrew. Really enjoyed this experience. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you. You too.
A big thank you to Ben for coming on the podcast and sharing his stories from his time in Russia. So fascinating to learn a little bit about the culture and just day-to-day life, which is a little bit of a switch up from our usual. And of course, shout out to those babushkas getting up at 6 a.m. to shovel snow after big snowstorms. Wow, just amazing. As always, if you've got a story that you'd love to share, please reach out. You can find me at oneofftravelstories.com.